for joining us for the first episode of Musical Chairs with the Knights. Throughout these episodes, we will be introducing you to different members of our orchestra. Each knight will give a close-up demonstration of their special instrument. You might notice that each person considers their instrument to be the very best, but we'll leave it up to you to decide which one is your favorite. In addition to learning about each instrument, you'll get to see clips of the whole Knights Orchestra. In each clip, you'll see the featured instrument in action. At the end, we'll have a few multiple choice questions, so listen carefully and enjoy meeting our first three knights, David, Alex, and Agnes.
Hi everyone, my name's David, and I play the French horn. The French horn is a brass instrument. You probably know other brass instruments like the trumpet, or the trombone, or the tuba. Well, the French horn is right in the middle of all of those instruments. We're not quite as high as a trumpet or as low as a tuba, but we can almost get there. Listen to how low I can play. And listen to how high I can play. So we have a big range. In fact, we have the biggest range in all of the brass family. So we're quite special that way. You probably see me changing notes with my fingers here, pressing down on these things we call rotors. That helps me change notes, like this. But the horn is actually kind of special because the way it's built enables us to play it and we don't even have to use those rotors. That's kind of cool, right? Now, you're probably wondering what I'm doing with my hand in the bell. Well, let me show you. It serves a couple of purposes. The first one is I can change the pitch. Watch as I open my hand. It's a pretty cool effect, right? If I stick my hand all the way in, it almost sounds like a different instrument. Listen to this. It's pretty fun, right? We're also the only instrument that can do that. Now, the horn has been referred to as the soul of the orchestra. That's because we have such a beautiful, noble sound. Listen to this. It's really pretty, right? Well, we can also be really powerful. You might know this song. Pretty powerful sounding stuff, right? The French horn can make a lot of cool sounds. We can sound like animals. And we also have these things that we call mutes. If I put this in my belt, it totally changes the sound. Let's compare that with how it sounds normally. Quite a difference, right? What if we put this mute in? It's made out of metal. Pretty cool, right? We call this one a stop mute because it stops up the horn. So I want to play you guys a quick song on the French horn. I'll try to use some of the noble sound that I mentioned before in the lyrical playing, and maybe a little bit of the more strong playing that I mentioned before. I hope you liked my demonstration of the French horn today. It's been nice talking to you. Remember, my name's David and French horn is the coolest. Bye!
Hi everybody, my name is Agnes and I'm going to be talking to you today about the clarinet, how it works, and why it's one of my favorite instruments. So the clarinet is a member of the woodwind family. That means my instrument is made of wood and I use my wind or my air to get a sound to come out. Now if you've ever played the recorder, it's actually the same thing. You use your wind or your air to get a sound to come out of the recorder. The difference is between a clarinet and a recorder, besides that a clarinet is bigger, is that a clarinet uses what's called a reed. Now, clarinet reeds are made of bamboo. And you're probably thinking, bamboo? I thought that's what panda bears eat. And that's true, that is what panda bears eat. But within the family of bamboo, they also make a kind that they make clarinet reeds out of. So the clarinet has one single flat reed that you attach to the mouthpiece. And once the reed is set on the mouthpiece, you push what's called a ligature down, and there's two little screws that you turn on the ligature so that the reed can't move or slide off. So I'm going to show you what it sounds like to play the mouthpiece and the reed and the ligature not attached to my instrument. Now I'm going to show you what it sounds like once I put everything together. So panda bears are not eating clarinet reeds, and clarinet players are not taking any bamboo from pandas. Don't worry. So in the woodwind family, the clarinet kind of falls somewhere in the middle. We don't play as high as the flute, but we don't play as low as the bassoon. So I'm going to give you an idea of what one of my lower notes is, all the notes in between up to one of my higher notes. So I just told you a little bit about how the clarinet works and how we work in the woodwind family as being kind of a middle voice. And now I'm going to tell you the reasons that the clarinet is one of my favorite instruments. So I like to play all different kinds of music, fast music, slow music, and one of my favorite slow solos goes like this. That is a little part of the beginning of the Mozart Clarinet Concerto. Now, when you play a concerto, you stand in front of the whole orchestra, and every time you play, you are the solo. So now I'm going to play the very beginning of the third movement of the same piece by Mozart. So you can hear that composers within the same piece write things for instruments to play slow, play quickly, and everything in between. Sometimes composers give instruments things that we don't get to play often, but they're really fun to play. And every instrument has a different thing that makes their instrument special for these little things that we don't get to do very often. So I'm going to demonstrate one of those things for you now. So that's called a glissando, and a few other instruments can do that, but of course, because the clarinet is one of my favorite instruments, I think it sounds the best on the clarinet. Another thing we get to do sometimes is this. That's called flutter tonguing. Now, if you take the tip of your tongue, you put it on the roof of your mouth. Some people are going to be able to do it and some people can't. So when you play clarinet, you put the mouthpiece in your mouth and you do the exact same thing I just told you to do. Composers don't write for those two things very often, but when they do, it makes it a little bit more enjoyable to play. But like I said, I love all kinds of music, fast, slow, medium, doesn't matter, as long as they're writing for the clarinet. So I can't wait to see you guys, I hope, in person next year. And the last thing I'm going to play for you is a piece honoring the Spanish composer Manuel de Falla. Thanks, guys.
Hi everyone, my name is Alex, and today I am so excited to be here to talk to you about my favorite instrument of all time, the violin. So, the violin is the smallest instrument in the strings family, which means it can also play the highest. So let's take a listen. While the violin can play very high, it can also play very low and growling sounds as well. So, as you can hear, the violin is so versatile and can do almost anything. Here's an example of a piece that lets the violin sing beautifully. This is a piece by a woman named Florence Price. While the violin can sing so beautifully, it can also play very, very fast and flashy. Take a listen to this example from a piece by a guy named Johann Sebastian Bach. Now, that's not all that the violin can do. The violin has so many tricks up its sleeve. Let's take a look at a few of them. One of my favorite things to do on the instrument is called pizzicato, and it's where we take our finger and we pluck the string instead of using our bow to make sound. It sounds like this. Another sound that I love that the violin can do is called tremolo. Now this is where you move the bow really, really fast and it makes you feel like you have the shivers. Sounds like this. Now if we want to go even a step further than that, the violin also does something called ponticello. And that's when we make the violin sound really scratchy on purpose. Another special thing that the violin can do is called harmonics. Harmonics make the violin sound like somebody is whistling rather than singing. It sounds a little something like this. One of the things that I love about the violin is that it can play so many different genres from so many different cultures. One of my favorite things to do on the violin is called chichara, which is a percussive technique that mimics the güiro in Latin American music. This is heard a ton in tango music from Argentina. It sounds a little something like this. It's a cool sound, right? It turns the violin into almost a percussion instrument, something like a drum. Now, take a listen to a short example of this technique from a piece called Libertango by Argentinian composer Astor Piazzolla. The violin can also do something called trills, which is a fluttering sound that sounds a little bit like a bird. You can almost hear the wings of a bird flapping when you hear the violin do a trill. Take a listen to this next piece, which is by a Korean composer named Lee Song-yoon, and the piece is called The Little Bird. While you listen, see if you can spot some of the techniques that we just learned about. So, now that you know a little bit about the violin on its own, how about we talk about the violin in an ensemble? So, in the Knights, just like in most orchestras, string quartets, any ensemble, there are two sets of violins, the first violins and the second violins. Now, while there are two separate sections of violins, they play two very different roles and are both equally important. The first violin is traditionally used to, number one, play the melody, and number two, lead the ensemble. While that's usually the job of the first violin, the section is very flexible, and sometimes they play the accompaniment, sometimes they drop out altogether to let another member of the orchestra shine. Now, the second violins, in my opinion, along with the violas, are the heart of any ensemble. The second violin has so many different jobs. The second violin is responsible for playing the accompaniment most of the time. The second violin is also responsible for filling out the middle of the sound of the orchestra. The second violin also has the melody at times and just needs to be extremely flexible. So, how about we take a look at the violins of the Knights in action? Well, I hope that you all enjoyed getting to know the violin a little bit, and I hope that you love this instrument as much as I do. I want to share one last piece with you all, and this piece is titled The Lark Ascending, and it's by an English composer named Ralph Vaughan Williams. Now, earlier on, you heard me play a piece titled The Little Bird. This piece is also about a bird, but this bird is on a very different journey than the first. While you listen, I want you to let your mind wander and see what kind of story comes to mind as you listen to the music. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you enjoy. Bye!
What material is used to make a clarinet reed? A. Coconut shell. B. Recycled plastic. C. Bamboo. D. Cork. Question 2. Fill in the blank. The clarinet is a member of the blank family. A. Adams. B. Woodwind. C. Marsupial. D. Brass. Question 3. What does a violinist use to play pizzicato? A. A bow. B. An arrow. C. Their teeth. D. Their finger. Question 4. Which instrument can play both low sounds and high sounds? A. The violin. B. The clarinet. C. The French horn. D. All of the above. Question 5. Which of these instruments is not a member of the brass family? A. The trumpet. B. The flute. C. The French horn. D. The trombone. Question 6. Where does a mute go to change the sound of a French horn? A. In the bell. B. In the mouthpiece. C. On the rotors. D. In the pocket.